Welcome back to Breaking Strings. We got a special guest because this guest was my former student, but that was quite some time ago. We're thinking back to 2017. She graduated and then she went on to Indiana University, Jacobs School of Music. Grace Elmer is an associate guitar professor at Jacobs School of Music in Bloomington right now, and she's also starting her doctorate in the fall. You can hear her in the guitar duo G2O, and she's also in the podcast world, which I just found out yesterday. That's pretty amazing. She's the editor of the Music Tectonics podcast produced by the PR firm Rock, Paper, Scissors. Grace, it's excellent to have you. It's going to be really fun to talk with you because I hope, I taught you for those several years, but now I'm going to learn so much from you. It's like so many years later. So much time has passed.
I know, it's so great to chat. Thanks for having me. My goodness, what an honor.
Oh, it's an honor to have you. And every time I hear about one project of yours, you tell me about three other things that you're doing that are all in the music realm, but they're not exactly related. Like you have these this extreme collection of very, very useful skills, which I find to be extremely valuable because I felt like when I graduated, I really had, kind of these smaller set of skills that I really honed and I worked really, really hard on. And then you enter the world and you're like, oh, so to be employable, you actually have to know a whole lot of other things. How did you go on this journey? I mean, was it something you did immediately or?
Yeah, it's sort of interesting. I think, well, first of all, just the gift of Indiana University and the Jacob School of Music, which just has so much stuff. And I think I walked into that undergraduate degree just like an ambitious little 18-year-old, like I want to do it all. And I signed up for every class and practiced a lot. And I think the first thing that kind of fell into my lap was actually the audio engineering. So you were mentioning that I'm a podcast producer now of a different
Hmm.
podcast. It's
Hmm.
actually still in the music realm, but we talk a lot about music technology, which is really cool. And I fell into that. I basically I worked for a couple years to receive a certificate in audio engineering. So I took a bunch of classes and labs, and I worked in a studio for a while to obtain this degree. So I graduated my undergrad and had an internship and then later a job with this PR firm. And so once I kind of got into that, I realized, oh my goodness, not only do I have a cool job where I get to like meet the CEO of Reverb or, Boomy or some kind of other crazy music tech client, but now I can like produce my own music. I can record myself. And so you mentioned the guitar duo Gituo, which is a great project I've started recently here at Jacobs. Jack and I, my duo partner and I, actually record and produce all of our own stuff. The only thing we don't do ourselves is the videography, but we're in the videos, so that's a little hard to do to swing. So I think that was the first thing that kind of was like the first skill I kind of collected. And then from there, I just kind of kept reaching for more. So I do speaking engagements a lot. I do tours. I do lots of things for the admissions office at Jacobs, which has kind of helped me with some public speaking and learning how
Hmm.
to kind
Hmm.
of schmooze and talk with people and kind of sell a school and sell the image and sell yourself and those kind of skills. I've been in a lot of operas. I'm like the biggest opera nerd of all time, which is like so unfortunate, right? Because 12-year-old me chose so wrong, right? Guitar is never in the opera, and yet I love it
Yep.
so. But I've sort of weaseled my way into like a couple of operas. I think three just in my master's degree,
Wow. Wow.
and one very recently, actually a flamenco opera. So I trained um, flamenco style, and I got to play like a true flamenco guitar and work with some amazing specialists. So um, yeah, and now kind of diving into some different skills like teaching, which has been a really fun part of my master's degree. I'm an associate instructor of guitar at Jacobs. So
Hmm. Hmm.
I teach group classes, 4 or 5 every semester in beginner and intermediate guitar, so amateur guitarist for the most part. But I also have private students, one of which actually just got into Jacobs last month,
Oh,
which is super
excellent.
exciting.
Excellent.
So I'm working with both amateur and higher level students, in addition to collaborating with an ensemble that I co-direct. So the teaching and arranging music and performing all of it just together is kind of my favorite part of my undergrad and my master's so far. I actually just graduated from my master's
Yeah.
this week, so
Congratulations.
I'm
Yeah, that's excellent.
um, just kind of taking a moment to think back of some of these great opportunities I've had to have over the past couple of years. So
So there was a bass professor at Peabody. He had something plastered on his wall. It was handwritten, and I'll always remember it. It said something to the effect of, "Be everywhere, go to everything, practice only on the days that you can eat." So I think the main point of that is that when you're in that music school, conservatory, community setting, you never know what experience you're going to have that may, change your way of thinking, may introduce you to something new. There may be a connection. It could be a career connection, or it could be a change in your career path. But it was basically, the point of it was to absorb absolutely everything. Would you say that's kind of been the philosophy for you from the very start?
yes, very much so. In fact, my colleagues at Jacobs, they joke that my calendar, like my Google Calendar, looks like the game of Tetris, except I'm losing. I mean, I think my kind of thought is I'm only gonna have this much energy for so long. I'm only 24 once, right? And there's only so long I'm gonna be able to be the Energizer Bunny. And so I just kind of love it. I love everything that I do. There's not anything I'd love to drop, and I like being busy and I love that I'm getting all these different experiences. So I definitely agree with that, especially when you're young and you have the time and you have a whole university or conservatory at your disposal to just soak in as much as you possibly can. I mean, for some people, you only have 4 years to do it. You know, you have to make the most. Um, as you were sharing that phrase, I was thinking about this memory about a year ago. 10 days before the opening of an opera called The Coronation of Poppaea, which is a Monteverdi opera. It's Baroque, so everything in figured bass, and there are therbos and cornets and historical singing and things like this. And 10 days before opening night, someone reached out to me and said, "Hey, we're thinking about taking this in a kind of more modern direction, kind of leaving our stamp on it. Do you want to write your own, make up your own modern guitar part?" This is like 10 days before the show, and they hand me 330-page score. And I'm just a lowly guitarist. I don't play figured bass. And just 10 days later was sitting on stage and playing, and it was a lot and it was fun, and I feel like I just got to totally dive into a whole different style of music. It was so much fun. So yeah, I definitely embrace that philosophy, especially when you're young and you have the time and the energy and everything. So that's a good representation of the last 6 years, I think.
I think that that whole philosophy that you started, trying things that are uncomfortable, as long as you enjoy them, and trying to do things that are seemingly difficult and tackling them. That's the best thing that you could possibly do, because as you know, I moved to Germany after living in the United States for so long. And when I was living in the United States, I was actually, even though I was moving around from Baltimore to Washington D.C. back and forth and stuff like that, it's essentially the same area. It's like the greater Washington D.C. area. And when you're coming into a different country, a country that economically also works differently, culturally it's different, and everything about the music business and the financial side of the music business is a little bit different. And when I say a little bit different, I mean a lot different. So going into these kinds of situations after being essentially comfortable. I mean, a musician is never quite comfortable. I mean, it's a very difficult life, and plus, of course, we had COVID, and I moved here during the height of COVID and everything like that. So there was that. But this whole time has been sort of an exploration of things that are uncomfortable, which is why this podcast came to mind, because I was like, yeah, a couple of years ago, I really wanted to do this podcast, and I just decided, okay, well, I'm not really ready to do it. I'm not good at it, but I like the idea. Why don't I just do it? It's really going to be a good experience anyway. And everything that you were saying about doing the figured bass, playing in that opera, yeah, that's pretty much how my philosophy has completely changed, especially now. I'm all about, you know, if the water is cold, there's ice floating around in there. It's not going to kill me. Why don't I dive in and see what's going to happen? And a lot of times, what happens is it is difficult, right? It is very difficult, but when you come out on the other side, it feels pretty good. I mean, it feels great to try something new and get a new skill under your belt. I mean, I bet when you tried that figured bass project, just the sheer pressure of completing something in 10 days, I think it taught you a lot. I think it taught you a lot about like time management and how to just be really comfortable with something that you don't know that well, right? Because it's not like something that we prepare for a concert where, we started it months ago. We've probably played it for friends and things like that. So working on a tight deadline, yeah, that's a wonderful story. I think it'll just inspire people to not be afraid to do these certain things. And when I was your age in school, I didn't like I didn't like to do stuff that was uncomfortable. I like to stay within my concert, and I also didn't like. I read that quote that I was reading to you from this really wonderful bass professor, and I was like, okay, well, yeah, I agree with that as long as I practice 10 hours. And if you practice 10 hours, you're not living by that philosophy, because if you're practicing 10 hours, you're shut in your apartment or practice room or whatever for that time, and that's less time that you're interacting with people. And I think practice is definitely important. I think that if you don't work on yourself when you're in school, you're not going to get the most out of your chamber coaching sessions and your lessons and things like that. But then there's all this other stuff and these other projects. And I actually, looking back, I turned down similar projects when I was offered them back then, because I was like, oh no, I'm not going to work this up in 5 days. No, there's no way I'm going to be ready to do that. But really, I should have been thinking in that direction, because the way that everything culminated in my life is that I'm at a point now where I have to be accepting of things that are not going to be comfortable and not flowing really well. I'm in a completely different country. Teaching is now the forms are like completely different, with a lot of stuff being done virtually and things like that. I never would have thought that it would have moved in that direction. But yeah, you have to be comfortable teaching everybody in that same way. And actually, as a small note and a small memory, our first lessons were actually virtual, right? In like 2014. So we did this like Skype lesson stuff before it was cool.
Yep, that's true. I lived in Alabama at the time, and I was getting ready to move, and I think that you were in DC, and so that's true. The first
Yeah,
couple lessons were Skype. Yeah, I remember.
yeah. I gotta ask you a question that would probably be on anybody's mind listening to all of these things that you're doing while completing a master's and then starting a DMA, a doctoral degree, in the fall. Your time management skills must be just absolutely incredible. I mean, I think you could have your own course just on the time management. I have terrible time management. And yeah, my wife always gets on me because she says, you can do some things well, but you can only do like one thing well at a time. You cannot like multitask. And yeah, it's so challenging. It's so challenging for me to just completely flip my brain. And how do you do that? Like, how do you have these different things that you're doing. So if you're editing a podcast and then practicing things for a duo and then practicing solo stuff, and then you also have these students that you're working with, each of them with their own various things. I mean, you work with students, you have everything that comes with a student, their emotions, like how they feel on that particular day, what pieces they're currently working on, what are they struggling with, how do you keep them motivated? How do you keep them encouraged? How do you also make sure that they're living up to their potential? And that is not just something that happens in the practice room or the room that you're teaching in. I mean, that's something that you take home with you. So you have all this stuff going on, and you're obviously thinking about it. How do you kind of order it in your mind, and how do you sleep peacefully, and how do you stay organized?
The real question is, how do I sleep at all? And
Yeah,
the answer is I don't. No, I'm kidding. Actually, the past month, I feel like this last month of April, I don't know when this will air, but the month of April, I feel like particularly challenged me because I was traveling so much. Travel really just throws a wrench into everything. So
right.
it was very fun. But in general, like day to day, I would say probably my life hack is that, or maybe the gift is that I'm a morning practicer. That's pretty much it. Is that I do all my practice in the morning while my mind is still and while my day isn't hectic yet. Um, before I get on campus, before I'm teaching students. And so once I do get on campus, I can start to shift my energy towards them. So I mean, I basically like block big chunks of my day for each kind of thing I might be working on. So the morning is always for like me and my practice and my own solo music. And then the afternoons are usually for my students. And then usually, if I'm working on audio, that's like an evening thing. I also run a student organization, not to add to the list, but I'm super interested in like leadership, basically. This is sort of just my own take, but I think there's sometimes a void in classical music and maybe even guitar in particular of really strong leaders, people who are really good, got big personas on stage and know how to walk into a boardroom and ask for money and things like that. And I'm interested, you know. Maybe it's because I've had all these other skills I've been picking up along the way, but I'm very interested, and IU is a great opportunity to practice this. So I have an organization here that I run. It has over 100 members that are all guitarists, and I get to raise money too and practice that and running events and so all of those things kind of it's interesting that they're all music related, but they are different. You're right. You have to kind of separate things in your mind. And I think that part was the most challenging, especially getting into my master's, is okay, you can block off the parts of your day and you can have a cute little calendar, you know, being optimistic about what your day is going to look like. But the truth is when it's time to sit down and practice and focus, or when it's time to walk into a classroom and work with your students, or work on a grant proposal, you kind of have to shut the rest of the world out, those other things on your task
That's
list out.
absolutely right.
And I
Yeah.
think practicing, I know you're big about like mental focus and meditation. I've gotten into that myself. Making to-do lists, making task lists, being realistic about what you can do in a day. All of those are great strategies. And I think that's kind of where I've been practicing more because now I have the time management down in terms of the amount of time I spend on what task, but it's also about how do you laser focus your brain power on that one task when you have so many other things going on in your life.
So tell me about this. So flamenco is so interesting to me because it's kind of, I mean, it's certainly the cousin of the classical guitar style, but the approach is so different. I've dabbled with pieces, especially just in the practice room. Every now and again, I dive into flamenco, pretty hard. I love the technical challenge of it. How did you get into playing this particular style? Because it is different. It requires such a different touch, a different sound. And flamenco guitarists also, they play on typically on different guitars where
Yes.
the action is going to feel completely different. And you're pushing more for a sound that will cut through the sound of a dancer or the sound of a singer. So it's
Yes.
kind of a less intimate sound in a lot of ways, in the ways that a classical musician would, or excuse me, classical guitarist specifically would approach sound. Just classical musicians, classical guitarists think of the guitar slightly more delicately than
Yes.
a flamenco guitarist would, right? How
Hmm.
did you make this shift? Because for me that was hard. I think I still play flamenco music like a classical guitarist. I don't think I have definitely not made that jump. How did you do this?
Well, first I got into flamenco style and practice and just experimenting in actually kind of a sad, scary way. About 2 years ago, I got this horrible, horrible injury. I basically shattered the ring finger on my left hand, like badly. And it took weeks and weeks to heal. And so I was kind of out of commission. I couldn't really play my solo rep. And so me, the little stress ball energy energizer bunny, I just wanted to practice and I was like worried about if I could play ever again. And so I just spent hours and hours just practicing with my right hand, just right hand alone. And you do the scales and you do your Giuliani arpeggios, and then that's 30 minutes or an hour. And so I started coming up with more stuff and started just looking into more things just because I was wanting to play guitar more and I didn't have my entire left hand to work with essentially. And so I started picking up the flamenco style. So strengthening rasgados, and of course now I had all day to do it because I didn't have a solo rep I could play, and working on this different kind of style, and of course listening to rhythms and kind of getting to know other aspects of the style besides just the right hand technique. And then of course once I recovered from the injury, being able to play more. So that's kind of how it started, which is sort of sad, but um, it ended up being a really good thing. So I gig sometimes in this style. We have some groups here on campus that play this flamenco style, and of course, then getting it to be a part of this opera, kind of making that boundary between the classical that's so refined and so like, homing in on your tone and that kind of every little detail that we love in classical guitar, to the shift to flamenco, which is just meant to be gritty. It's meant to have some power. And I personally just love that. I think a lot of my own classical playing started to shift being part of this opera because I was
Hmm.
just sort
Hmm.
of obsessed with the power, like almost drunk with power. I was like, oh, look how loud I can be, look how fast I can be. And then I was cranked to 10 in this huge opera house that makes you feel really powerful and big. And I think I just loved that. And so it sort of warped a little bit into my classical playing in a very interesting way. But it was a transition. And what was great is that the school actually bought me a beautiful flamenco guitar with the lower action and the different, slightly different design that I got to just keep and practice. And it was beautiful. And so that also helped me with the adjustment, is getting to actually play a genuine instrument. So it was a wild ride, I will say. And the improvisation too, which is its own challenge, having to improvise with singers on stage who are behind you that you can't even see, and just having to roll with the punches and just be a part of such a large production. It was probably the most amazing musical experience I've ever had.
It's not so easy to just continue working like you did with your other hand, and thinking positively. It's not so easy for everybody to do that. But that was I think that was an important story.
It kind of made me grateful just for like small things. Like I remember the day I got the splint off of my finger, because it was just one finger that I broke very badly, that just playing a C major or just playing the opening moments of Fugue 998, like just the theme was the most like special thing. It kind of makes you appreciate, like, we spend so much time in a practice room kind of dogging, oh man, our hands can't do it, and we're frustrated, and you spend all this time thinking about all the things that could be better without appreciating how amazing it is that your hands can do this at all. And I think that kind of gave me
Right.
new appreciation because he'd been woodshedding and just being in conservatory and working so hard that the kind of beautiful thing that came out of it, besides the weird flamenco tangent that I took, was
Hmm.
this
Hmm.
new like
Hmm.
appreciation for how amazing it is that like our bodies can do this thing that shouldn't be possible, these tiny movements we make and the speed and the accuracy and dexterity, and yet we do it anyway. And it's beautiful.
If you could come up with a list of, five important skills that would be important to develop for somebody that's entering a music school, either a university or a conservatory, just basically doing a music major. What are the five skills that would be very, very important? And ideally, some skills that are not part of just the core curriculum, like your basics and obviously music theory, ear training, and what you're doing with your one-on-one with your instrument professor, with your main instrument professor. What do you think?
Oh, This is a good one. Mine might be a little bit off the beaten path. I'm definitely going to skip over theory and oral skills and music history for the moment, although I think those are very important. Um, oh, I think one of the big things is performing as much as possible. I know that's not like a skill is performing, but gigging, any kind of gig, background music, weddings, little smaller concerts, big concerts, operas, chamber, doesn't matter, to perform as much as possible. I mean, the difference between myself now and when I entered conservatory, those 6 years, how different I feel and how different I look and just my whole persona on stage is completely transformed. I think my favorite thing, one of my favorite pieces of feedback from my most recent master's recital was from my parents, who are, by the way, very big fans of this podcast. Um,
Thanks.
and and it was really cute. They came up to me after the performance and they said, it was really fun to watch. I was asking them about their impression of the difference between the junior recital and the master's recital. And they said watching them my junior recital just 3 years ago made them nervous. They just sat there the whole 60 minutes and just were nervous about how I was going to do and if I could make it and memory and if I could crash and burn. It's like watching a gymnast, are they going to stick the landing? That's how they felt the whole time. They said it was very nerve-wracking. They did not, and they were happy for me, but it was nerve-wracking. And they said the moment I walked out from my master's title, they were like, she's got it. She's a pro. And it may not even have had anything to do with these big technical differences, although I've grown as a guitarist. It's more about how I carry myself on stage, how confidently I walked out and sat down and addressed the audience or started the piece, that I have gravitas because I've just been on stage the past 6 years, like nonstop. And so I think that's such a big important thing. I mean, that's what's going to captivate audiences. I mean, we can practice all day long, but the truth is if it's boring, if you're not convincing, you're not going to fill a concert hall. And I think these days if you want to have a career in music, you need to fill seats. You're an entertainer. You're an artist, but you're also meant to be convincing. It's meant to be captivating. And that's a really important part of developing artist persona. So I think being on stage as much as possible is definitely number one. I think nowadays, audio engineering experience. I think even a class or two or an online course learning how to produce even just your own instrument is essential. To me, it is essential. So I could not be more grateful for the opportunity I had in my undergrad, but there are great online courses as well, to teach people how to record music, and the equipment is getting cheaper and cheaper. So the entry level to recording your own music or even your own podcast is getting easier. I think that's so important. Um, I would say probably the other big one, I know I'm supposed to get to five, challenging me here, but the other big one is probably the time management, mental focus balance. So being able to not only manage your time, but when you do manage your time, being able to lock in and focus on tasks. That is definitely something to maybe not master in college or conservatory, but to attempt to master in this time. Because once you
Mhm.
leave, it only gets more challenging to do. And so I think that's probably the next big one for me. And then aside from that, one that's kind of come up, this is sort of like I feel kind of lame just bringing it up, but getting good at social media or getting good at selling yourself or being able to write, you know, interesting posts or comments or being good about publishing on your YouTube channel. That's something we always go, oh, we'll do it later, or oh my gosh, I'm too busy, and then people aren't seeing your work when they could. And so it's something I know I need to be better about, but I'm sure a lot of other classical musicians have a goal as that as well. So I don't know. That's four. I don't know if I can make it to five. I mean, there's so many. I don't know what five would be.
You've seen so many things and learned so many things that I see this entirely new philosophy that is has the character of how I knew you back in 2017, but now it has like this like amazing experience. So it's great. I'm looking forward to seeing everything that you're doing, and please come back to the podcast and give us your wisdom. It's been excellent, and it's been inspiring for me to not just to watch you, do everything from afar, but also to hear about it here on the podcast. It was really great.
Well, thank you so much for having me and letting me ramble on. This has been really fun. So great to catch up with you and everything with guitar. Oh my gosh, the guitar nerd talk for half an hour is such a gift. So